Welcome to Speak Sex. I'm your host, Eurydice. I'm a writer from the island of Lesbos. My guest today is my fellow writer and sister and a woman I admire for so many reasons, Porochista, Khakpour. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love your work, and
I love your work
you too.
I love you too. Love fest.
Porochista Khakpour is the author of 3 critically acclaimed books, most recently Sick. That's HarperCollins, which has been praised as an eloquent and unflinchingly honest book about a woman's relationship to illness. And also a reflection on personal and human frailty and the human condition. It's an intimate memoir about living within a body that does not feel at ease. It's gotten great reviews. It has been selling very well. Her first novel was Sons and Other Flammable Objects, which is how I get to know her work. Her second book was The Last Illusion, was Best Book of the Year in 2014. And Porochista is a Persian who lives in America. So she's a fellow global writer. Right. Because we write in English because it's the Latin of the modern world, but you were born in Tehran.
Yes.
And you went to LA, how old?
Well, by the time I got to LA, I was at, preschool, kindergarten age, but because it took us a while to leave Iran, and then we traveled via Turkey throughout Europe, and then eventually, the refugee story went so that we got to the East Coast, and then like almost all Iranians decided to go to the LA area. Yeah.
So that's why you don't have an accent.
No, I learned on the playground to cultivate a Valley Girl accent. That was very intentional better. Because I had an accent. I remember that when I was first put in ESL, I had an accent, but I was obsessed with pop culture. I was obsessed with MTV and like TV shows. And, this was LA in the 80s. And so, I very much intentionally remember trying to cultivate a Valley Girl accent. Now I want to get rid of it all the time. I wish New York had rid me of my Valley Girl accent.
De-accentize.
It didn't do it. It still comes out. So I don't know. Depends on where I am. Right now I'm in Miami. So like,
oh yeah,
you don't know.
Here everybody has an accent. So
but
no one can hear each other's accents anymore.
Right. But I don't know if I should be New York or LA or what. But it's always funny to me when I'm in, cities other than those 2 cities that I predominantly lived in, because it's always like you code switch to some degree depending on where you are. And I don't know the codes here. So it's like, I don't even know how to speak here. But I love the way everyone speaks. I love the way you speak. So I kind of wish I had my accent.
You sound to me like an intellectual Valley Girl. I would. And you may be the only one.
The intellectual Valley Girl, I'll take it. Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, I have always hated my English because, for those who are not multilingual, we don't think with an accent.
Right.
So when I don't write with an accent,
right.
And then when I open my mouth to give a reading, I am like, there's a major disconnect. I'm like, why do these words sound like that? Like, that's not what I intended. It sounds so foreign to me.
Do you think in Greek mostly, or do you dream in Greek?
When I'm in Greece, I think and dream in Greek. But here, I think and dream in English.
Right.
But English was my fourth language. So I've got my full baccalaureate before I ever even started English.
Wow.
And then I was learning Spanish, and those Romance languages, I didn't have an accent because it's the same pronunciation.
Of course.
So, and of course, this was in the town of Heraklion in Crete. So the Cretan lady teaching me English did not know I have an accent because she had an accent. She spoke English like a Cretan.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
British English like a Cretan.
Wow. That's
so
hilarious.
with that language, I like arrived in LA when I was 15.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
And I mean, I was, let's say intelligent enough where at the age of 15, I was put in honors English as a senior, but I didn't know what these kids were talking about. I would be like, you're so off the wall. And I would like, look at the wall. I didn't know.
Love that.
So it's interesting, that I think as a foreigner, you look at the culture differently, more objectively, but also the language, which is our main topic of interest and,
of course,
thought, the language.
Yeah.
So you don't take it for granted and you don't abide by its given rules, as eagerly as the natives.
I was just telling students today about how a lot of writers who speak English get called language writers. But it's funny. I mean, it's like I have mixed emotions on that, but I also think a lot of us become stylists. It's not a coincidence that Nabokov was a stylist and
the best.
And that you certainly are, and I think instead of like I don't know what's the opposite of that, a sort of badly trained speed skater who's just kind of plunking along, or a snowboarder. Mm-hmm. But that's my thing. I think, we have that love of like the English language because we can see it outside of ourselves. And I think that's really, really, really special. And I almost can always tell when I read a book by a writer who doesn't have English as their first language because the appreciation of the language and what they do with it is so magical. So.
Yeah, I very often pick up the foreignness in my work after, in like maybe a 4th or 10th read.
Yeah.
But I leave it there because I think it enriches it because it echoes my own ancient tongue and, my linguistic journey.
Yes.
And it also kind of absolves English from its transactionalism, which is its main use, worldwide.
Totally.
So I think it can profit from that more lyrical, oddity.
I often tell editors, they sometimes want to edit me because I'll have inversions that are almost like Yoda
Yeah, the
speak.
inversions. Yeah.
Yeah, and they'll be like, you mean, this clause needs to go before this clause. And I'm like, no, actually, I want it to be a little bit irregular because that's how it sounds in my head and must be how, and usually has to do something with Farsi. And I need it to sound like that. I know how to write a basic sentence. I know how to normalize for English speakers. I was a journalist too. I mean, I know how to write a straightforward sentence, but I don't want my prose to be straightforward. There's a reason there's certain twists and turns that I want to take in my language. And so I have to fight editors on that a lot. Have you had to fight editors with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my feeling is that you cannot get readers, to stop and think unless you give them something unfamiliar.
Yeah.
So if you in any way allow them to go where they've already been, they'll stick to what they know and they'll just like not even pay attention to what you're saying and they will, have a goal in mind. Like, what's the story? How does this end? Yeah. What does it tell us about all of us? And it's like, no, it's not about all of us. It's about you.
Exactly. Yeah, you have to waken the reader. Is that right? Did I say waken right?
Awaken,
so now I'm becoming yourself. You have to do that, and you have to shake them out of the sort of basic rules of. I don't know. Grammar to me just seems like so 101. It's kind of ridiculous, And I know the copy editors. I love them, bless them, all that, but. I think a light hand is always important when you're talking to prose stylists. And I think a lot of what's missing in contemporary literature is a little bit of experiment in language. It's almost like writers their egos are so fragile that they're afraid they're going to think that. And I don't think we have that insecurity. And we were talking about this the other day. Like you and I are not particularly insecure people.
Right.
And I think that is...
Well, I think that I mean, two things. One is, yes, you have to master the grammar before you can sabotage it. You gotta learn something before you can take it apart, whether it's like an engine or whether it's a watch or whether it's, the components of a language.
Right.
So yeah,
I loved my Strunk and White when I was
Strunk and White. I still
school.
have it. I still have it on near my desk, very close, within arm's reach.
Yeah.
But, and it's not to so much follow it, but to be aware of what you're undoing.
Exactly.
It's like art school. When I went to art school in Europe, we had to go to the museum every day and copy all the statues. And there was no skipping it. We had to do the sculptures, we had to do the paintings, we had to do the Renaissance paintings, copy for like 2 years.
Wow.
I came here and it's like they didn't want to copy anything. They just said, so just express yourself, just be you. And, but we weren't taught the basics.
Right.
So that's the difference, like deconstruction is great, but you got to go through the construction first.
Yeah, definitely.
So you earn it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But I do feel that as women, we owe it to, our fellow women to smash the patriarchy and tear things up. So I do think that we have a double responsibility. Like if male writers are doing it for some sort of like inner rebellion against the dominant culture, we owe it to our sisters, and our ancestors and our daughters who have or have not yet been born to take apart the logos and find in it some sort of space for us because we're excluded.
Yeah, absolutely. And yet we're the creators.
We're the creators. And like, open it up, like stretch it open, all these meanings that are only reinforcing our oppression.
Yeah.
All the definitions, all the laws, everything that makes up this language is designed to keep us in our place.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So we do have to, fuck the language up.
Yeah. I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, it took me a lot of years, I think, to realize, what women had to understand that why some of my favorite writers were women experimental writers, and why and their role and the tragedy of so many of them being underappreciated or underrecognized. Mm-hmm. But that's the lineage that I feel like I aspire to belong in. I hope I belong in some way, but I read their bios and it's like the same shit that we see today. I was just talking to my students today about Leonora Carrington and the horrors that she went through with, the Surrealists and Max Ernst, and then being committed to mental asylums constantly. And, the drugs they gave them back then, I mean, those were like first generation, God knows what, antipsychotics or who knows. I mean, she was literally fed poison for years and told she was insane. And she had to go to Mexico City to finally come into her own. I mean, that's a journey. But you see, she was insane. That's the system, When we women become like fake men and buy into all the laws, and we want to like dress like them, talk like them, earn the perks and the money within the system, we forget that the actual woman is the crazy woman in the attic. We have been defined as insane. Yeah. And we have to like cut ourselves off completely from our truth, both our body truth and our, spiritual consciousness, ancient memory, DNA truth, in order to fit in and be like logical and sane and play by the rules. Yeah, totally. I mean, it's such, I think you have to be older too. I don't see it's so easy for young women. I mean, I remember a whole chunk of my life where I was like the girl that hung around with the boys. And I think even at that point, when I was first reading Leonora Carrington, I misunderstood what was happening to her as she hung around with the boy surrealists, and I used to think those photos of Max Ernst forcibly kissing her, were sexy in a way.
Right.
But now I see it really differently. And I see it as like, why did she endure all that? Why did it take such a big part of her early life? She went through such torture, and she was so talented as a visual artist and a writer, but she was so screwed by that. And then, there's just so many examples of women that were, had to literally tear themselves out of those paradigms. But I see women today, like contemporaries of ours, who are literally trapped in the same way. And I wonder what would happen to their prose, not just their prose, but what would happen to their like essence, if they were torn away from it. And, as a single woman, there are times that I wonder, like, oh, did I pick the right path? Is this the wrong path? Do I need a partner? Do I need a male partner? But I don't know if I could have created what I've created so far.
Well, I think that seeking the approval of a man of authority is something that you cannot do unconsciously. You just, cannot allow yourself to do it without thinking, because it will destroy you.
Yeah.
And a lot of us, when we're young, we side with the manpower because that's the only power there is. And we know that like the alternative is becoming our mothers and being a nothing and a nobody and invisible and just like a maid or, something.
Serving our dads.
Serving the man. Yeah. So, early on, that's all you see. Either you become the man or you become the servant to the man.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, that's true.
But then slowly, within like the limited tools that were afforded by the system, which is the male language, the male thought, the male philosophy, all that stuff, we realized that, wait a second, just like they created all of these that we're using, we can create our own.
Yeah.
And we had, perhaps, it's not in written history, but hey, written history is very short.
Right, that's true. Right.
I do think that our moment is coming.
That's what I was going to ask you. Do you think the question I constantly have when I'm trying to like talk to younger women or students is like, are we there yet, or are we arriving at it? And a part of me is always an optimist and wants to say we're either like getting there or we're there. But I don't see how we are there yet. But we've got to be close. But the impediments, this last gasp of the patriarchy, if it indeed is the last gasp, is I think like really, really, really killing a lot of us. I mean, it is a struggle. It's taking a lot out of our bodies and our minds and all that. So it's like, I've seen a lot of women suffer in the last few years, but I can't help but think like there's another, we're going to get over this hump.
Yeah. I hope so too. For sure, right now, sexism is prevailing.
Right.
Like, just the pigs are in charge.
Yeah.
And we are lucky that we're here and not, in countries, well, our own countries, our native countries are even more repressed. But, we came here thinking, when I first came here, I thought, oh, wow, like feminism is like really, it has taken off. It's unstoppable. I identified as post-feminist.
Yeah, right.
What's the hubris of that? I was like, oh no, that all has been earned and I'm a post-feminist. And then, it turned around and even feminism, like that second wave had been forgotten, So we get co-opted so easily.
Yeah, in the 90s, I thought it was like fine, like everything was okay.
Yeah, me too.
And
me too. We were all post-feminist punks.
Yeah, totally.
It's like, what?
And it's like, I don't know if it's like 9/11 that happened that moved everyone behind or what, or just 2000s culture, But I mean, it couldn't have just been 9/11. I think I was a music journalist back then. It's like culture and the music that came out right after, grunge and Riot Girl was so, that sort of boy band and, that sort of sugary pop that you saw with so many of these young, ex-Mouseketeer like singers. It was so conservative that the sexuality was so basic,
so conservative.
And it was like such a change where it's like just the years, like literally 2 years before in music history, like, you had groups like, Bikini Kill and L7 and Hole and all these women that were like PJ Harvey, like people that dominated the charts, acting completely like beating men at their punk rockness by far. And then there was like no talk.
Nothing. It all ended.
It's like it was like suddenly it was disappeared.
I know. And I think it began with AIDS. Because the fear of like sex, the new fear of sex, right? Put a damp on our sexual revolution.
Yeah.
And then with and then it was the election, well, a little bit, the whole Monica Lewinsky moment was very strange for us because we wanted to say that like free sex, but it was clear that was wrong. But that was our people. So it was just like a major reckoning. And Anita Hill, we lost that battle. Monica Lewinsky, we didn't even know where we were in the battle, but we lost it.
Yeah, totally.
And then, of course, that election of 2000, the whole thing of like the millennium is coming. The millennium brought us the stolen election.
Right, exactly.
Which was like a coup. Yeah. We lived through it in Florida very much. Like my vote was not counted with the Chads then. And then 9/11 right after. And so, it just seemed that the world was shifting and we haven't gotten our bearings since. But the Christians and the evangelicals and the white supremacists, they have been very comfortable.
Yeah, that's true.
Because they got like Bush, twice. Barack was just not a rebel.
Everyone wanted him to be.
We all wanted him to be
but he never said he
decisive.
Was. Right. No. He was always a moderate and he was always but everyone was so eager to have our first black president be like a Black Panther.
Yeah.
And he never said he was. And so, and we always knew that he was going to be
a consensus guy.
Right. And not great on foreign policy.
With the enemy.
Right. I mean, he wasn't a great friend to the Middle East, certainly, and he wasn't
not at all,
and not to journalists either.
No,
and
not to journalists. Whistleblowers got it worse than ever.
I mean, it's horrifying.
A lot. Immigration, tough on immigration.
I know people don't realize that.
Yeah,
and then this atrocity now,
and then this where it's beyond. Speaking of language, I mean, forget we're like saying the language is male. Okay, but this is like prelingual. This is masculinity that's prelingual.
Totally. It's prelingual. It's like, I'm absolutely right.
It's just like kindergarten playground machismo in charge.
Literally, like, just grab him by the pussy. What was that?
Right.
I don't even remember. It was so stupid. It was like, I just can't even believe it.
It's all illiterate stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't know. How do you fight that?
Doesn't read, that doesn't care about reading, that doesn't,
Yeah, that he's proud to be like a brute.
Yeah. And then you have like a whole portion of the nation that thinks that's fabulous.
Yeah, they think that's
it's like, it's just crazy. I mean, it would be like, for a writer, it would be like almost comical and laughable if we didn't have to live in it. Well, they think that he is actually a rebel. He's like, he's like a reactionary. So all of a sudden, not we as women, but like we as like language people and so on and so forth have become the patriarchy. They shifted everything in such a convenient little way that we are the status quo and they are the revolutionaries, and like we are the PC tyranny. I mean, wait, since when? Like since 3 days ago? I know.
Have we forgotten history? Centuries? What time frames are we working with? Right?
Exactly. It's so bizarre. I mean, the idea, I think part of it is like, again, we're talking about like being experimental writers or like out of a norm. But Donald Trump has sold this idea that he is part of this like iconoclastic maverick America, this myth, of the American who doesn't fit in. And yet everything he believes in, from his like weird KFC like dinner to like boasting about McDonald's to like his wife to like every single thing about him is like as basic and normal and conventional as every aspect of the American dream is, you know? I don't know where this idea of the American maverick iconoclast. I mean, it's almost like Americans think that it's a Cormac McCarthy novel, and that America was full of these like weird renegades who went through the night, you know, and did all this like, you know, weird, subversive, esoteric like activity. But I truly don't understand it. I mean, if they're talking about the Puritans, that's one thing, but it's, to me, that rebellion is not a real rebellion.
No, because it loves corporations, period.
Loves them, loves brands and all that.
Profit, that's what they love, you know.
Crazy.
So it's just all in the end on behalf of the dollar. It's not on behalf of like individual freedom or
that's the thing,
the
money.
Rights of even like white dudes. It's not even about them.
Yeah, money is God here. And that's the thing that is, you know, whether you believe in God or not, I think everyone can agree that this is a problem in America, is that like instead of the same way, you know, in certain countries you'll have religious fundamentalism. Here our religious fundamentalism is capitalism.
Yeah.
So that is,
I agree with that completely.
Is an illness.
It is the fundamental illness of the country.
It's one of the most diseased forms of religious fundamentalism. And people say these other religious fundamentalist countries, well, they cause deaths in the name of God. Well, we cause deaths all the time in the name of money.
Name of profit. I mean, that's how slavery happened, which is the ultimate sin of America.
Yeah.
And, you know, the religions of America, evangelism, all of that are all about money. And they buy faith. They, you know, the same way that so many Americans buy love, you know, it's just like materialism will make you happy. Yeah. It doesn't, but that's the gospel that we spread around the world. And we, you know, when you have people who are vulnerable because their cultures have recently fallen apart or, you know, imploded, like the Soviet Union or China, you know, vast cultures that have imploded, but are ancient, in fact, you know, even India, they're very vulnerable to this message.
Yeah, totally.
Of like, you know, material bliss.
But that's the funny thing is that goes back to what we were saying about like reading and writing. It's like if you're a well-read person, even like, you don't even have to be that well-read. Every cautionary tale in every culture says those who go chasing that pot of gold, the story doesn't end well. And that doesn't mean you have to like be a starving artist either, as we were saying today. Like that's not
especially
noble
not
either.
A woman starving artist.
Exactly. Like, we are owed like our, you know, a lot of money as just women existing in this society. But the point is like that pursuit in itself of just chasing money is a cursed pursuit. And that's been the American game, like for so long. I mean, and it's an empty game. There's there's nothing beyond it. You know, you have your stacks of cash, your Scrooge McDucks swimming in your you know, pool of dollar bills, and what's next? You know, you just accumulate stuff.
Yeah.
But where does it go? And you have all these entrepreneurs, right, who then set up nonprofits for tax write-offs and stuff like that. I mean, even that system to me is like so laughable because philanthropy is like, again, and
a euphemism.
Yeah, exactly. It's still tied to profit.
Honestly, it's a lot paying taxes so that, you know, the people don't have money for like infrastructure and teachers and healthcare and the basics. And you pretend that, you know, you're taking that money and doing some good. Come on.
That's so bad.
Gross. And it's also all ego-driven. It's all like power hungry, you know, like let me have all the centralized power over as many people as possible. Just like,
gross.
I don't know. I know it is. It's very really unbecoming. And karmically speaking, just like, you know, I think detrimental, devastating for the person doing it.
I think we understand because we came from ancient empires that fell and had to learn their own lessons of, you know, but, you know, and that's the thing. This empire has been teetering on collapse for a while. It's certainly, it's nothing. I mean, it doesn't have the can't compare to our empires. So I'm biased, but I feel like
I'm biased too. I agree.
Our level of innovation and invention and our arts and culture. I mean, just all this country does is borrow from that without knowing it. This empire can't survive, nor should it, if its entire currency is currency.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just like the bank of the world. That's what it is. It's a bunker.
That's what New York City now looks like, by the way. I miss New York all the time, but when I go back there, everything is just banks.
Yeah. Same with London. Just, that's all they are.
It's so wild to walk through downtown New York and you have drugstores and banks. And they're often like the drugstores are sometimes in the old banks and there's 10 million other banks. It's a weird, eerie thing.
It's definitely post.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is not healthy.
Well, I feel that's our opening for the natural religion, for the return to like the feminine powers, for ritualizing behavior, for kind of destabilizing property laws, inheritance laws.
Yeah.
I mean, anything. I believe, I feel that as women, we should try to destabilize as much as we can because it's all stacked against us.
Right.
Right. I mean, you and I have the name of our fathers by which we're recognized, and then our daughters, if we have them, are supposed to have the name of their still to a certain degree passed from one man to another as their own, and the inheritance laws are the same. I mean, a couple of like the 20, 30 years ago, women couldn't have their own checking accounts without a man signing on to it. So the few rights that we have gained are very recent.
Right.
And we just gotta remember that and not take anything for granted and keep pushing for more.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to stop using the money we have or make to make ourselves desirable objects that men will want, and instead make ourselves more powerful.
Yeah, we have to redefine that.
Wiser, and bring in our sisters and try to kind of like discover our strength in numbers in whatever our area and our part in the in the culture is. Having that consciousness and kind of like trying to put women first.
Exactly. It's been really, really disheartening to see women tear each other down at times in the last couple of years. And it's like, that's exactly what patriarchy wants. It's exactly what it needs, is to create those divides. But at the same time, on the flip side, there's been a lot of women coming together. I hope that they're not only coming together through like misfortune. That's one of the things that sometimes I thought about with like the Me Too movement, which was, potent and important in its own way. But I thought, like, this can't be the only thing that brings us together is our tragedies. I remember in Riot Girl days, like, one of the things that women would often bond on was, like, how much we'd been raped. And I remember feeling that connection to other women who'd also been raped. And it was like, okay, we've been through this horror together and, like, we get it. But the future I envision that I hope for is, like, a time where we can come together in complete empowerment and joy, and we control that. And we, it's like we can walk by rows of fuming, angry, red in the face men who just can't even like keep up with us, and we're walking in light, and just like that's what I want to see. Because I think, it's been, for my body at least, the last few years, it's just torn me down. It's been really, really hard. I don't think it's, my illnesses are unrelated. In some ways, but in some ways they're not. They are very related to this political climate. Stress has been unreal for me the last few years. And a lot of that has had to do with activism or fighting for other women or fighting for myself or all that. And it's taken a lot out of us. So how do we preserve ourselves so we can continue doing this,
Well, I definitely feel that your body, and And what has happened to you personally is because it's a female body. I don't think that if you were a boy, man, you would have gone through it all. I just don't, so I think it's a particular openness and openness that comes part and parcel with being a woman.
I totally understand. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, like I said, so many of my friends right now who've had physical trials the last few years have been women. And it's like they're strong as hell. If it did happen to men, they wouldn't have survived it, I think. But we survived it. But, like, it's just like, I just wish, I'm so torn on how self-care works, really. I love still the work of Audre Lorde, and she's been very important to me. And what she means when she talks about self-care, I think is different than how it's become commodified, of course. But like, how do we take care of ourselves and still stay afloat in this environment? I mean, I used to get very angry when people would say, like, you should rest more. I'd say that's there's something like subversive about that. What are they going to do while we sleep? That's actually like very ancient culture shit.
I feel that
hypervigilance, right?
Yeah, I have that too.
Like, what are they going to do while we do they need us to like not produce or something, or just hide while they go and burn the villages down, or what? It's like,
always like the bed rest, which is was very often, very commonly the treatment for women was disempowering them.
Right.
You just go to bed, take a year off, stay 9 months in bed while you're pregnant or whatever. It's always like bed rest out of the circulation.
Right.
I agree with you. I think that, in the 50s and 60s, we were all given the Valium, I mean, before that, like bloodletting, leeching, whatever. It's just taking the life away from us.
Yeah.
Disempowering.
Constantly controlling women's bodies. And like, and at the same time, I know like I'm an example of someone who probably should have rested more, but we have to rest on our own terms and own that idea, right?
Yeah.
Like that's like really tricky because the pace of the world is completely crazy. This has to be last gasp of patriarchy because there's a panic in the pace.
There is a panic, and there's also such an anxiety.
So much anxiety. And it's like I think a lot of us as women, I certainly internalize the anxiety of others. I have to learn to not do this. I mean, I've worked on this with so many therapists and healers. It's like surround yourself, like protect yourself. Don't take on the horrible energy, especially of these men who are panicking all around us. A lot of these white males who are losing their minds all around us. And protect yourself. And again, be around women who and don't just be around women who've had easy lives.
Right. Be around women
who are kicking ass.
Exactly.
With major
badass
challenges.
Women.
Yeah.
And be around nature.
Oh yeah.
Because nature is female.
It's true. It's true. The only time I feel well is when I'm around nature.
Yeah, me too. I feel so much better when I'm in nature because everything is in its proper place. I just don't feel that imbalance. There's just too much phallic bullshit all around. And
do you think technology is masculine energy?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think technology is so controlling.
I do too.
Yeah. So, Porochista, how long did it take you to write Sick?
Sick, actually, the first draft of it, in a way took like years. It came from it was a messy thing. It was like emails and bits of letters to people that I just had sort of compiled and like bits of Facebook posts. And I thought it was going to be a much more experimental book. And it was like this weird sprawling monster. And then after I sold it, and then I tried various attempts at different drafts, I totally wrote a different book. I wrote it all post-concussion, which was crazy. I threw away what I had from before, and I wrote it in months, really. Wow. I mean, I wrote it in under a year, certainly. And it was feverish. I mean, it was part of my concussion treatment. I wasn't supposed to look at computer screens, but I was also like, fuck that. I don't want to not look at a computer screen. I want to regain my mental strength. So I sort of went against doctor's orders. I wrote it really fast, but I also wrote it simply, the way someone with a concussion would write. And then I felt, oh my God, what am I doing? That's not good. That's not like my previous work as a stylist or someone who writes complexly. And then I thought to myself, well, writing it simply might be the right thing for my audience, actually. I mean, I wanted other sick people to be able to read it the way that I had written it, which was, in the manner of a simple, thin book. And people still say it's complicated and spiraling, and it has some multi-layered narratives, but certainly less complicated than my other work. And I wanted it to be kind of like a page turner that you read in like a few hours. And that's the reports I got from a lot of readers, which my other books were not page turners. Page turner kind of sounds like an insult, but
for us, but like for the general population, it's a great compliment.
Right. I mean, I liked it for this book only because this is like, for me, this book doesn't really count to me. Like every time someone says, should I buy one of your books? I always refer them to my first two books.
Your first books, yeah.
Yeah, because this wasn't like a book I chose to write. This is a book I did as service.
That's what my sex book that I'm working on, I feel. I mean, I don't know that it will be a page turner, but in a sense, that's what I think, that it's nothing to do with my work per se, but it's a service, to like my sisters mostly and to my moment in history. And it's something that I know so much about.
Right.
So you want to share it.
Yeah.
And you want to share it in a way that's intelligible to as many people as possible.
Right.
So you can be of use.
Yeah.
And I think that's what probably happened, that you learned a lot. I mean, I know you learned so much. You're kind of like a practitioner, a healer right now by default, because you have so much knowledge.
Way too much that I did not ask
all
for.
Kinds of alternative treatments. And a lot of what you've been learning about are women's diseases, everything that's immune deficiency and everything that's not quite diagnosable is something that women get more than men.
Absolutely. I mean, like so much of...
Just the female body is not as familiar to Western medicine as the male body, which is the standard.
Yeah, which is, I keep telling my many male doctors, that's why I can't do well on a lot of the medications they want to give me, because these were medications that were tested on men. I know that. I mean, I do poorly on most Western meds. And all my like diagnoses now are evolving into like semi-autoimmunity and things like uterine fibroids or like cysts on my breasts or thyroid nodules that's, at first seemed cancerous, and all these, like, they're very specific ways that the Lyme and the biotoxin illness are manifesting that I do think of as sort of like, sadly, like, female in a way. I mean, even just like the issue of weight. I've lost a lot of weight, and that's been really something I've been thinking about a lot. I'm in a really dark moment a few weeks ago, because I go to doctors and I say, this is not my body. I'm too thin right now. And they go, no, you look fine, you're fine. And I go, no, I am Iranian. Like, we have curves, and I miss my curves. And I was crying about a week or two ago with some friends of mine. I thought I should just go to like a hospital and say I'm anorexic. And then maybe they would actually like focus on my weight.
Saying. Right.
And realize that like it's really hard for someone to get well who's constantly eating and constantly losing weight. I'm not throwing it up. I'm not, it's just not being absorbed properly. But these doctors, they don't look at, like you're saying, like nature is feminine, right? Nourishment.
Yeah, nourishment is so important.
Right.
And I don't think it's an accident that as we women get a modicum of social power and visibility, we had to shrink more and more and more. When we were just like pure objects and we were the damsels in distress and we were not good for nothing but like being fucked and then, procreating. We could be like voluptuous and lie on the sofas, know, and be objectified all they wanted and they could lose themselves in our flesh. But, all of a sudden we got like, it's not even equal rights or equal pay, but like we got out in the marketplace after the Second War, especially, and we got positions we hadn't been allowed in before. And so we got a little bit more power. And it's like start shrinking. So now the ideal woman is so thin that there is no way that those extremely undernourished, gorgeous models could get what an average woman gets done, which is like have a job, 9 to 5, have kids, raise kids, deal with a husband, pay the bills. I mean, we right now, equality has actually been translated into our doing the job of 2 or 3 people while we're supposed to be emaciated.
Yeah, exactly. It's such a good point. I mean, it's really, really, really sad. I mean, that's always like the dark side of the 90s where I used to be like a 90s obsessive and I'd be like, those were the good old days. But then I think about like heroin chic and that was like when I had like gotten to New York and I was praised for like having the body of a little boy, and partially that was just like the aesthetic and partially that was just like me being too poor to eat. And
no, it's the aesthetic and we fall victim to it. And, the way that I'm sorry to interrupt, but, I lived it for sure in the 90s in New York. And I was like, if I gain weight, that shows that like my mental power is diminished. I mean, but that's how I thought, I'm in charge. My body is like my slave. How sick is that? Like, I wasn't holistic in any way. It was just like my body had to be under my control and I rode it as hard as like a slave driver.
I know.
And I only felt empowered if I proved my, like my male mental control over my poor body by like not feeding it or whatever it took, just using it as if I'm the man. So it's a split eye. So the eye was really all brain. And the body was again like the objectified female that I could have my way with.
Yeah, totally. It makes so much sense. It's so weird.
Because we internalized
that we did that.
Maleness.
God, I wish we could, people say no regrets. I got a lot of regrets, but like, I'm not tormented by my regrets, but I have regrets. And my part of that is like, I wish those prime years I had lived differently.
Me too.
And I had eaten nice food.
Yeah,
and I had not done every drug. And part of that was again like competing with boys, like being around the world of men who like just like all the drug dealers were males, all that partying was run by these horrible boys, all the rape culture that was so prevalent. I mean, you think about grunge and all that. I mean, all it was this champion. And now I find it so embarrassing. It's so funny. It was like music that was so important to me. And now I find such a chunk of it to be so, so embarrassing because it's like these mediocre men who are whining about God knows what while they were raping women all the time and like relying on, except Kurt Cobain. I make that. I was talking to a friend the other day and it's like, we were discussing this, and I think someone, I don't know.
Well, he was a Pisces.
He was a Pisces. I love
he was a sensitive
Pisces.
boy. I know.
Yeah, you guys are great. I mean, he was a sensitive boy, and he was very much chronically ill.
Yeah,
and that's the thing that people forget about all the time. It's in a suicide note. I mean, so much stomach pain.
His stomach.
Who knows what? I mean, medicine wasn't advanced enough. Why did Kurt Cobain his whole life like? He was in pain. I mean, that whole hunched look that we would always imitate, the bad posture that Kurt Cobain had, those granny sweaters that he would wear in pajamas. That's literally like what I'm wearing half the time. Like those, like it's like what chronically ill people wear. You know, he'd show up on stage in bathrobes.
I know, but he glamorized illness.
He did, but it was before we had the language to think about chronic illness.
We didn't even know until. Well, I mean, we knew a little bit, but it was only when he died that it became clear how real it was.
Exactly. Because no one was thinking a 27-year-old then could have like maybe an autoimmune disease or something like that. And these days we see it all the time in teenagers even, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's like they're just, it's so crazy. That was so the recent history. And a male like that, who was very much, I think, in the feminine in a sense, was totally ignored and pushed and pushed and pushed to perform and make more money.
For everybody else.
And
all
he was
the handlers.
asking for help all the time.
Yeah, he was
every interview
he
changed the subject. I mean, you know, people say don't talk about your health too much or whatever that stupid thing is. He would literally. I've now read several interviews with him where he would change the topic to the body all the time. People would ask him about record sales, and he'd talk about like he has this like hope in this new antacid or something because it's killing him. You know, I mean,
I hear him. I understand.
I get that too, and it's like, nope. You know, of course he turned to drugs, like. You know, that there was nothing else like at that time. I mean, I'm sure he had access to good doctors, but no one was looking at a young guy like that and thinking this person is chronically ill.
But I feel like, you know, he kind of started, well, he didn't start, but he was like at the forefront of that confession culture where suddenly we could talk about our problems in, you know, public. I mean, it started with like the personalist political and the feminists, the second wave. But that generation made it okay.
Yeah.
And that, to me, that was very positive and very difficult because in our cultures where we come from, it's like secrets, the family secrets. Constantly. Keep it all to the family. Do not,
never talk about your problems.
Your problems, your illness.
Oh, forget it.
Yeah, like what a shaming of the family or that whole thing that we were raised. To have a certain facade, like, you know, we're royal or something, which we're not, but, you know, that, appearances above all.
Oh, I know.
But now we've come like full circle, perhaps, where everything is confession, everything is memoir. You know, this generation who have been raised on social media, you know, it's like sharing everything, oversharing, over, you know, kind of like discussing the detritus, the minutiae of their lives.
Yeah, totally.
So now I feel we're in a moment where there is zero discrimination and we're kind of afloat. We're almost lost in, you know, TMI. So I think that we're ready for some balance again because we've gone too far in this direction, and as a result, we have lost our capacity to recognize what matters most. I mean, out of all the things that we tell each other.
Right. You think like I'm so curious. So do you think like like the oversharing has muddled what matters? Like it's kind of caused like it's trivialized things. Yeah, I can see that. Like, and I'm an oversharer in a lot of ways. I mean, that's been part of I worry about that often.
Well, we were saying yesterday about rape, the difference between rape versus like verbal
sexual harassment.
Yeah,
which is really an important distinction to make. Neither are okay.
No, neither is okay.
But the experience of those, every woman I know my age, like we've been through both. And while the experience of sexual harassment is horrific, it is very different than the experience of rape, which to me is like, when I think of my rapes, like they're akin to like I don't think of them as a sexual act. I think of them as something closer to homicide. That's how I felt when that was happening, was that I was going to die. Where someone's sexually harassing me, while it's uncomfortable and disgusting and threatening in a sense, I didn't fear for my life.
Right, exactly. You know? Yeah, I feel the same. That you know, the rape definitely is a death of sorts.
Yeah.
Sorry. It is a death of your innocence. It's a death of your understanding of your place in the world.
Yeah.
It ends any assumption you may have that, you know, you have a right to exist.
Yeah.
So
your body becomes foreign to you.
Yeah, your body and your body becomes the storage of trauma.
Yeah.
So both from a medical, place, but also from a psychic and spiritual place, all of a sudden you're like a garbage bag. You're full of shit. You're full of garbage that hurts you and that you cannot like simply get rid of. You have to do the work. You have to, do a lot of work to clean up, to cleanse, to detoxify, to get all that out of you. And it just accumulates in you so quickly, like how quickly it lasts so briefly, chronologically, but it marks you for so long.
It's horrifying.
Yeah, it's horrifying in so many ways, especially because it happens to most of us when we're young. So it's even more, it kind of like scars you even more profoundly.
Yeah. And we were taught, it's like the opposite extreme of what you're talking about happening now. We were taught to just suck it up.
Oh yeah, suck it up.
I didn't go to therapy for rape.
Yeah,
I didn't
neither.
report my rapes.
Me neither.
I didn't do any of that stuff.
I tried to report mine and, my family was like, oh my God, it's going to be a shame. You can't go to the police. Our name will be dragged in the newspapers. We have a certain standing in the community. What? And then the police department, tried to suppress it. So it was, and all of that continues to happen. It's just, there is a system in place that does not like, the horror of it. Like, look at Brett Kavanaugh. It's the same thing,
totally. I didn't tell my parents till years later, and they were predictably not great about it either. They were, again, like, it was like a shameful thing. Like, my mother even like said something like about, the first time she said this, she doesn't say this anymore, but when I was much younger and I told her, she was like, well, remember how you dress. And I was like, how you dress does not, what? And I still see these stupid comments on the internet where people say like, oh, she's asking for it, blah, blah, blah. And again, this, like, so much, like, I think of like Helen of Troy.
Yeah, exactly.
So much goes back to this like phobia and obsession with female sexuality. When I was a kid, I always wanted to write a screenplay of the Helen of Troy story because I was fascinated by that, right? The face that sailed 1,000 ships.
1,000 ships, yeah.
And it literally, like, Helen's beauty was like responsible for like
20 years of war and another 20 years of trying to get back home, and like thousands of women, including hundreds of royal women, being sold to slavery as loot and whatever.
Literally, because Helen...
But he got her back.
Right. It's crazy. That story, I always have wanted to like write that from the perspective of Helen, because like we don't know really like what would Helen have felt like. We don't think about Helen's personhood at all.
Well, I mean, that part of the, part of that whole narrative is that Helen has no agency at all, because it's actually the three goddesses who like wager amongst themselves, and then they endow this human who at the time was like a shepherd. Turned out he was the son of a king, but I mean, when they picked on him, he was like tending sheep, and they were like, okay, we give him the enchantment necessary to go get Helen. So, the apple, that whole thing, the apple is always, of course, in the, in the garden of good and evil. Totally. But what's interesting is that she never had a choice. We are never told whether she wants to marry Menelaus or his brother Agamemnon or any of all these suitors that her father got together, or if she really wants to go. She doesn't have a choice. It's like the Aphrodite decides and she goes with Paris. And then, the gods help the humans fight. And, so again, there was never an issue of like what she did, but the female body is like the vessel. Right. And, the only way that that human culture within patriarchy has found to undo that is to cover us up, to eliminate us, hide us, keep us in women's quarters, put us behind the burqa or the whatever name you have for it, but basically hide it. Instead of familiarize it and make it normative, but it's not.
I mean, it's so funny that I just thought the other day someone was talking about going on like live television. And I thought a few times I've been interviewed for like TV or video things, and they'll still say things like, don't wear tank tops or short sleeve shirts.
Yeah. They
like,
still say that.
and it's like, it reminds me, and I think of like, is this the Islamic Republic of Iran? Like, really, what is so scary about my arms? Like, that's going to make people think of sex and sexuality. Like, that's how
the shoulders.
pathetic, like, it's crazy. And so I see a lot of younger women just like opting to like hide their bodies, you know, and that's to them maybe a form of empowerment. I don't know what they would do if they didn't live in a world that was this sexist and this like, you know, criminal with its sexism.
Yeah.
Would they feel that need? I mean, I see them coming up with creative solutions and making it like fashion.
But I think that, you know, covering up the body is just going along with this exotization of the feminine, you know, which is part of our undoing, part of our marginalization, is that we're always the other, the exotic, you know, other, right? The object of desire instead of like the subject.
Well, again, was that a survival thing in the 90s, androgyny? Because androgyny in the 90s was very different than like non-binary culture.
Yeah. It was very different.
That same.
That's how we got our power, the little power we had. The little equilibrium of power was by becoming androgynous.
Yeah, like my head was almost shaved. It was so short, and I would go to clubs where people didn't really know my gender, and I dressed like, you know, and I don't know. I can't remember why. That was, you know, I shopped from the little boys section. Like, you know, when I go to clubs, I'd buy like a Elmo t-shirt or something from the boys section or something. I don't know. And I don't know what, I don't know what that was about. But whereas like I look at it, those photos with some affection, I also am a little bit disturbed by it, because that choice to like opt for androgyny, was it protective? Or was it like empowering? I don't understand, because again, like that narrative was interrupted by the 2000s. So we weren't able to work it out. Like
no,
we
never worked it out.
Of it.
Yeah.
And what would have happened if that had been uninterrupted?
I don't know. I think we were trying to steal or, you know, like borrow a little of the power of the men.
Yeah, maybe.
But yeah, it ended. I mean, I got knocked up. I got pregnant right then in, you know, in the 90s and so, I got I think my daughter was like 2 when 9/11 happened. So I didn't even remember I could get pregnant when I got pregnant, and none of my friends had kids. I wasn't conscious of children. I lived in a very adult world, you know, in New York City. So, I went to the midwife like with my purse. I didn't have outfits for the baby or a hat or a car seat or I just thought I'll give birth and I'll go home and live my life. You know, like I have a dog. I'm a good dog mom. I can do the kid mom thing.
That's amazing.
I didn't have any concept of it.
Wow.
Like a man again, you know, being so deeply in like this man's world that, but it definitely, you know, having a daughter there taught me a lot, but in the process, so much changed. And then I woke up when she started going to school, you know, Montessori, and she was like 3, and like everyone around was getting boobs and, you know, implants. And that's when I realized the culture has shifted again.
Right.
And, you know, everybody wants to be like a Barbie. When did this happen?
It is so crazy. I think about like Sex and the City and all
Sex and the
those
City,
shows, and like the obsession with Brazilian bikini waxes and like hairless
Manolo
Blahniks and these horrible drinks like apple martinis
and Jimmy Choo.
Right.
It's like overnight it happened.
It was crazy. I mean, that show feels more dated to me than like shows from like the 80s in a way, because it's like this.
It went like Farrah Fawcett, Forgotten. We all dressed in like deconstructed, you know, boy clothes, right? You know, more British really influenced than anything. Vivienne Westwood, whatever. And then you wake up and it's Sex and the City. Exactly.
Yeah, which had nothing to do with New York.
Nothing. I didn't even know where these women were. I hadn't seen them before.
I never, ever did. It was the sanitized, weird New York that was like almost like, I mean, I guess I could appreciate it on a level of camp, but even that doesn't work for me because they all were sort of like these wealthy women that
they were just women who would like marry Wall Street guys or date Wall Street guys and summer in the Hamptons or something like that.
Yeah.
But they were not anywhere where we were in the village. They said they lived where we lived.
Yeah, but I didn't see them either. Oh my God, I love that we're talking about this because I just like, I always feel so alienated.
And where did they shop? I mean, I didn't even see those clothes at Barney's.
No, exactly.
Where were they?
Vendels? I don't think so.
Know. Bloomies. Oh my God.
Yeah,
that's where,
yeah. It had to be that. Like, because it's like I literally never saw people. They weren't cool. Like, the thing about New York,
they were not in Soho. I mean, they are now, but they were not then.
No, they would never. I mean, the part of the charm of New York is that New York is perpetually cool.
Yeah,
you know, and it has a true iconoclasm.
Mm-hmm.
So to have these sort of like female icons that are supposed to be
they were
New
representing us. Yeah, I mean, the writer is the protagonist, you know.
Yeah, but again, like,
lawyer.
What writer did you know that lived like that?
Like activist lawyer? No, but are you kidding me? Who can afford that wardrobe and the closets? What?
It's so bizarre. I know. And yet, you know.
I mean, I had a lot of clothes in New York. You know, I bought my first Prada dress when I was in my 20s with like my first money that I put aside. You know, we all were like a little fashion victim-y, but I didn't do, you know, I remember actually I bought like, you know, wedding gowns and wore them at, you know, clubs and for fun. But they were not doing it tongue in cheek. There was no quotes.
There was no, exactly. Oh my God. Yeah, we always had like, I don't know how we always afforded those clothes. There was always a way. I once made out with a guy at a shop on East 8th Street. No, it was East 7th Street. It was a vintage clothing store. And I literally made out with him for 50% off this dress that I still wish I had. It was so great. It was like weird things like that happened to you, or like I got stopped on the street by some like designer who was like, "Hey, can you come by my studio? I want you to try on this thing." And you'd be like, "Okay." And there's just this like other feel in that city. And every time I go back, and I want that again. Like I want that community sense and that weirdness and that, you know.
Yeah. Everybody's very close to everybody else.
Yeah.
You know.
That college campus.
Definitely. Yeah.
Feeling.
It is. It is like a really cool campus life.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially since our spaces are so small still.
Well, maybe that was how they captured Middle America by creating a college campus that was really full of normals.
Yeah.
And that was the only way that could make it on mainstream TV. Because, I mean, wasn't Friends in New York too?
Yeah, Friends was in New York too.
What the hell?
And like, Seinfeld.
Yeah, Seinfeld I could kind of see.
Okay, yeah, that's more of boys. Yeah, I saw those boys, yeah.
But I really didn't see
Friends too. I could see Friends more, maybe not Jennifer Aniston, but everybody else, yeah.
Or not, I mean, Monica I could see.
Monica,
but Phoebe was like LA.
Phoebe was LA, but whatever, a transplant. I mean, Friends was more normal for me than Sex and the City. Sex and the City was just so over the top. I only understood it when I moved, not when I moved to Miami, but when, as I said, I became a mom and met other moms who had like husband money and shopped in Bal Harbor, and then I saw it.
Oh God.
You know, but until then, even when I was in Miami, it was so Latin and sexy and, you know, fast and heated, and people were not like dressed like that. But then I entered like the private school world of parents, and I met them. I met them all. Man. And it's, you know, I just felt progressively year by year that we were, you know, retrenched in going backward. And, you know, then my daughter became a high schooler, and it was the the story of like the boys getting the blowjobs on the school bus again, and the girls, and no one was talking feminism. And it's like, wait, we had gone so much further than this.
Yeah.
And here we are, like starting over. And I have to explain to them about oral sex because they don't know that boys go down on girls.
Right.
What? And I have to tell them like, do not give it unless you get it first. And no one else told them that. And this is the 21st century.
You had to teach your daughter that.
Yeah, I had to teach her and her friends.
Oh my God.
No one said it.
You were that mom who was like the cool mom. Like, I always wished that mom could have taught me things.
Yeah.
I would hear rumors those moms existed, but I never knew where they were. But that's some God's work you did right there.
I did, I know.
It's like,
I know.
God, I mean, sex education. I was just listening the other day to that. Do you remember that Nana Cherry song with Michael Stipe?
Oh yeah.
It's called Trout. And it's about sex ed.
Yeah.
And sex ed was such a big thing in like the 80s and 90s, but like they did such a poor job of it.
Oh my God.
It was so
such a poor
badly
job.
done.
It's like you just wanted to fall asleep.
Oh my God. They didn't talk. I mean, they maybe put a condom on a banana and then they would tell you like, talk about dental dams or things you just literally like never saw in real life. And
never.
Like, and then there was a lot of like AIDS talk. I was constantly getting AIDS tests like obsessively, like just so scared. And then but there was no talk of pleasure. Certainly not female pleasure.
Certainly nothing about female orgasms, like how many different kinds there are, or how to get the G-spot going, or no.
No, mm-mm. I wouldn't. I had no idea what was going on, like for so long.
The big revelation was like the clitoris, exactly. Which, when you actually like look into it a little bit and study about it, it's just, 101. There is so much more, so many more erogenous zones and, orgasmic triggers.
Wow.
But we didn't.
I still don't know. I'm like, yeah, no, it's crazy. Like, there was no talk of that. Because again, you had to control women. You couldn't let the girls become sluts.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you couldn't let them run wild. You had to protect them from the boys, and you had to keep the women pure, or else, their bodies are vessels for procreation. So that's what they need to be primed for. It's so primitive. I mean, God, if climate change wasn't so depressing, I wish we could be zoomed into the future like 1,000 years, but I don't know. Like, I don't know how we survived it. We did it though.
I don't know how we have survived all this lack of reason.
I know.
All this insanity. But I think our first task is to separate morality from sexuality.
Yeah, that's
period.
Definitely true.
Right? So, and, then this podcast does exactly that. I'm trying to give a language for sex because there isn't one. It's the one thing that's like unspeakable and unarticulated. And, what you were just saying about sex ed continues all the way during the sex, right? And then, we don't negotiate what we're going to do sexually because we're supposed to be like overtaken by so much unspeakable, uncontrollable passion. And then during the sex, we're not supposed to talk about what we're doing or what we want or how to make it better, again, because we're supposed to be like beyond, speech and consciousness. And I feel that this is an opportunity for us women to just like take charge and say, okay, we're going to make up the language of sex and we're going to speak it. And since we're in charge of consent, we're going to say how it's going to be done, and it'll be better for everyone, for guys too, which kind of like absolves them from this responsibility of having to guess every female body they run into and like know what to do by virtue of having the penis, which like they know nothing about how we work. Exactly. It's completely unknown territory.
That's totally true.
I know. So I think it will be better for them too, but I'm really, care much more about, finding a way to give women a new voice and a new confidence, which then we can, take into all the other aspects of our lives, maybe.
Yeah, totally. I think that's a beautiful thought. And I think we can get there.
Yeah, we can get there. We can get there together.
Yeah.
If we like keep going and don't shut up.
Yeah, exactly. I'm so stimulated by like the thoughts of others and getting together and creating something bigger than both of our brains. Like, so I'm hoping that I can work on more creative collaborations. Because I just, that's just, I don't know, at the age, I hit my 40s and I became far more interested in that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just everybody, together is smarter, stronger, like more than just self-motivated, because you feel like you're doing something for the greater good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When we can hold each other up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's beautiful.
Let each other fall. I don't think we will.
We won't. We're here to stay.
Yeah, that's the thing. They cannot get rid of us.
We endure.
Yeah, we do.
We endure. Yeah, we're built better that way.
Exactly.
We're built to withstand a hell of a lot of pain.
It's amazing.
Yeah, those labor pains.
Every day I think of that. And I think of I deal with all sorts of pain, but then I think of the pains of even motherhood, and all of the creators, generation after generation, are the reason why we exist. And it's men could never. Men could never.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it was a beautiful conversation.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Come back.
I would love to. I love talking to you. And it's thank you for doing this podcast. I think it's really, really important.
Yeah. Thank you. I have no choice. And everybody out there, thank you for listening. This again was Porochista Khakpour here on a short visit, teaching in Miami. Thank you for trusting me as your sex whisperer. And until until I'm back next Friday, speak sex. If I could make love incessantly, I would be God.